Good morning. It's forecast to be a very rainy day here in Perth today, so I've decided to take a 300-kilometre road trip out east to see Corrigin and the Wave Rock.
Yeah, this trip took me to see quite a few quirky sites around Western Australia. Come with me as I travel through Corrigin, Statues Lake, Wave Rock, a very unique site called the Mile of Boots, and the historic township of York.
I made it to the Corrigin Dog Cemetery, and this behind me is the original grave. In 1974, Paddy Wright buried his beloved dog Strike here at this very site, and then 7 years later in 1981, Lassie was buried by Alan Henderson. And ever since then, the cemetery has grown to the point where it's now a national tourist attraction. Here's the resting spot of Ripley and his beloved tennis ball. There's the whole Dickinson family buried here with Bandit, Zeus, Ozzy and Nitro. There's a very high chance that Obi was the naughtiest pup of all the pups buried here. The statue was added in 1992 and it was paid for by the town of Corrigin from prize money awarded to them for 3 years of hard work keeping their town neat and tidy. And I'm going to go up to the town centre soon. I'm quite curious to see just how neat and tidy this place is. Just here across the road from the cemetery is the 4-kilometre Corrigin Wildflower Drive, which I'm going to do right now. And I've been told that I'm here at the perfect time of the year in early September to see all the wildflowers.
I drove the circuit, found little pockets of flowers here and there, and eventually came to Lou's Lookout. It was certainly beautiful country to drive and to walk around, and there were wildflowers out and about, but I think it was too early for the full bloom, so I made my way to the Corrigin town centre.
Well, this is Corrigin. Everything here today is closed except for the supermarket down the road, but I guess it's a tidy town.
I took some lunch at the Corrigin Roadhouse and then stopped to admire this ute in a field full of beautifully blooming canola.
It needs to be said as well that Corrigin holds the world record for the longest queue of dogs in utes. They set the record in 2002 with 1,527 utes in a row, all with a dog inside them. And that's the second time they've set the record. The previous time they set it was in 1988 with 699 dogs in utes. I just saw by the side of the road this very random lake, so I pulled in to see what it was all about. It's called Statues Lake, for the obvious reason that there's 4 statues here. The statues represent Is That Rain, crop inspecting, clearing land, and shearing. What a strange little place this is. Oh, the water is actually quite warm. And salty.
I took in the serenity of the lake, well aware of the dark clouds forming before me, before heading to my next destination, the majestic Wave Rock.
So here it is, Wave Rock. It's a 15-metre tall, 110-metre wide granite rock, and this curious wave shape was formed over the course of millions of years from water that was running through this area. Such an interesting geographical part of this landscape. I guess it's not so common to literally see waves on the Wave Rock, so I came here on a lucky day. I'm at the top of the rock now, where the wind and the rain has caught up with me, but wow, what an interesting place, and what a great view from up here. You can exit back to the car park going down that way, but it's a little bit too steep and slippery at the moment, so I'm going to come back the way I came, via the stairs.
Before heading back to the car, I decided to follow a rather flooded path on the eastern end of the rock that led towards a spot called Hippo's Yawn.
Look at this, I caught up with the flowing water along this track. A little flash flood going on in front of my eyes. I didn't know what to expect when I decided to come here to see Hippo's Yawn, but it is actually the way it's described. I'd consider that to be a very successful little outing. It was a great idea to come out today to see Wave Rock and Hippo's Yawn. Two magnificent pieces of West Australian geology. Well, there's one other place in the local vicinity I'd like to check out. It's about 77 kilometers away, and it's called A Mile of Boots, which, similarly to Hippo's Yawn, is exactly as it's described, a mile of boots.
I stopped briefly in the town of Hayden to admire their collection of statues, drove along a very rainy rural road.
Really pissing down now.
Unsuccessfully tried to make friends with some sheep. Little sheepies, look at me. And finally arrived at the Mile of Boots.
I made it to the Mile of Boots. This here is the first pair of shoes strung up on this fence. I'm going to walk the entire distance of it and I'll measure it on the GPS on my watch to see if it really is a mile. Someone's strung some up there on the tree behind me. They're fully equipped here with all the modern amenities. Right, I've pretty much reached the end here. There's been a gap of about 200 meters where there's been no boots or shoes, but these two here behind me are the last in the line. I'm going to consider this the end of the Mile of Boots. So let's see how far that's been. I've got 1.15 kilometers on my watch. I'm not quite sure what that is in miles. Okay, 1.15 kilometers is about 0.71 of a mile. So not exactly a mile of boots, but it's close enough. Well, this is the most surreal view. To my right, there's this field. Directly in front of me, the rays of the sun are shining down between the clouds, and to my left is a mile of boots. What the hell?
And with that, I set off into the sunset and stopped for a schnitzel in the historical town of York. I wish I had more time to spend here, because despite the dark, my quick walk down the main street really impressed me. And a final word from York, where I've just stopped for dinner, and it's a beautiful little town, by the way, full of all these historic buildings. But if you ever find yourself in Perth, I'd absolutely recommend travelling east to see the townships of Corrigin, to see Wave Rock, to see the Mile of Boots, and to come here to see York. It's been such a good day, and I hope you've enjoyed coming along with me. See you next time.